The light show, which is on at the Auckland Art Gallery, has all sorts of amazing light installations. I'm sure some of you have seen them. Some are beautiful, some are puzzling, some are clever, some, you really don't get unless you're really, really into modern art installations. But they're all designed to make us think differently about what we see and how we see and perceive it. Last Sunday, Richard Randerson, who was our preacher last Sunday morning, Richard and I were on a panel in the afternoon with Jim Mora from Radio New Zealand about light in Christianity. It was interesting enough, I think, but I think at the end, Jim was a bit frustrated with Richard and me. I think he wanted or expected us to say that the light of Christianity was the truth that would save the world, and if only all the world saw the light of Christianity, well, then all would be well. And we didn't really want to say that, and so we ended up talking past each other a bit, I think. I was more interested in talking about how many religions can give us light, and while yes, light is a central concept in Christianity, we don't have ownership of it and can't lay claim to it. In our conversation recorded for us in John's Gospel today, John the Baptist and the priests and the Levites rather talk past each other as well. John the Baptist says that he's not the light, but has come to testify to the light. And they say, well, that makes no sense at all. Who are you? He's not the Messiah, he says, nor is he Elijah. Although the other gospel writers all describe John as being dressed exactly like Elijah would have been, in camel's hair and eating wild locusts and honey. But he says, no, he's not Elijah. Nor is he the prophet. And the prophet would have been a Moses-like figure who was also expected, along with Elijah, to return before the Messiah came. Well, if you're not all those people, who are you then? They ask in frustration. But he refuses to be categorised or pigeonholed. Writer Barbara Brown Taylor says, here is a stunning refusal to place the coming one into any of the theological boxes that we have prepared for him, along with an equally emphatic rejection of the religious authorities sent to vet John. John is not going to humour them. He continues to talk in seeming riddles. John says instead, I am the voice of one crying in the wilderness. I baptize with water, but the one coming after me is much greater. John the Gospel writer says John the Baptist has come as a witness to testify to the light. Now, the Greek word for witness is martyria, from which we get the word martyr. Because, of course, later those who were witnesses for Jesus often became martyrs, and so the two words have now mean the same thing, witness and martyr. But when John the Gospel writer was writing, a martyria was either a witness in a legal proceeding or a prophet who named the truth of the events as they unfolded. So John is naming it or calling it as he sees it. He's being a witness to what he has seen. And so he tells the people that there is one coming who will be the light. Light, like the light of creation. God said, let there be light, and there was light. Or the pillar of light that led the people of Israel to freedom from slavery. Or the psalmist who prays that the light of God's face will shine upon us. Or the prophet Isaiah who said, the people who walked in darkness have seen a great light. Those who lived in a land of deep darkness, on them light has shined. At the Art Gallery on Sunday, we talked about darkness as well, and how we didn't want to be trapped in a dichotomy of light equals good and dark equals bad. Because in the dark times of our lives, we can learn and grow. In biblical terms, God is seen as creating the light and the dark, and the psalmist says, the darkness and the light are both alike to you. Richard said he thought that while there are some actions and even some people who we might consider evil, most people want to act for good in the world. But he said so often people get caught up in institutions or groups that end up acting in a way that does have evil consequences, even if that's not the way they started out. Richard talked about the banking policies that led to the financial crash of 2007 and 8 as an example. And this week the report about torture in the CIA would be another example. So there are certainly times when darkness is not a helpful or a positive thing. There are times when darkness is downright evil, and then light does need to shine upon it. John, the Gospel writer, develops his theology of light and sees judgment as being like the light that gets shone on evil deeds so they can be seen for what they are. Judgment in John's Gospel is not kind of a this is good and this is bad and you are good and you are bad, that kind of judge idea we have of judgment. Instead, it's about light being shone so we can see things for what they are. He says this is the judgment, that the light has come into the world and people loved darkness rather than light because their deeds were evil. For all who do evil hate the light and do not come to the light, so that their deeds may not be exposed. This week I attended a book launch for a book called It's Life, Jim, written by a local man, Jim Marjoram, about his life, about being gay in the church and finally coming out and stopping denying who he is. You may have seen on Monday and Tuesday the media coverage of a hateful and despicable email that Jim was sent by someone who called themselves a church pastor. I won't repeat the hateful words that he said, but they were indeed despicable. And when the media began calling me for comment last Sunday, my first reaction was not to comment because I didn't want to give a megaphone to those hateful views and even dignify them with a response. But the media were clearly going to run the story anyway, so I and others weighed in. It was important in the end that this self-proclaimed pastor did not get to speak for the rest of the church. And it was important that the judgment of light exposed his actions for what they were. At the book launch, Jim Marjoram said he actually felt very sad for this man who had in turn been vilified in the press and in social media, just more darkness piled upon it. Advent is a time of watching and waiting and being alert and standing up for what we believe. John the Baptist calls us to testify, to bear witness to the truth. When the CIA confess to torture and when people vilify others with hate, it's really clear what we are called to say, to testify. We say that it is wrong and it must stop. But what about the less clear times in our lives? What about the family gatherings that we all have at Christmas time, the family gatherings where we get together with relatives who we see maybe only once a year, and around the dinner table they can tend to be really racist or sexist? Do we stay silent? What about our workplaces where someone might be being bullied or put down or exploited? Do we stay silent? What about when someone challenges us about something that we have done or said that has offended them? Do we listen? In the letter of John, which comes later on in our scriptures but is written by the same community as the Gospel John, we read, "Whoever says, 'I am in the light,' while hating a brother or sister, is still in darkness." Our actions, as well as our words, show whether we are striving to be children of the light. Those kind of actions do define us as people of faith. In our passage from Isaiah this morning, we heard the classic summary of the call of the prophet, which becomes the call of Jesus. The Spirit of the Lord God is upon me, because the Lord has anointed me. He has sent me to bring good news to the oppressed, to bind up the brokenhearted, to proclaim liberty to the captives, and release to the prisoners, and to proclaim the year of God's favour. So who do we know who is brokenhearted this Advent time? Who seems like they're a prisoner in their job or their family? Who needs us to reach out to them, to notice, and to bear witness? We can't fix everything, and we can't help with everything. But we can do one thing or two things. We can bear witness. We can testify to love and truth. We can shine a light. We can occupy Advent with light and hope and joy.